Welcome to a new episode of Just Another Black Girl on the M.I.C. Janae Renee. Is there a war against Black women? Every time I turn on the television, I open up my phone, I talk to a friend, there is something horrible happening to Black women every day. And I cannot be the only one wondering what the hell is going on. So today's episode it's gonna be about that. Like, I really have no direction. This is National Gun Violence Awareness Month, so I'm gonna, mention a few women who have unfortunately lost their lives to gun violence within the last few months. These are just the ones that I know about, and it's over 10 in like 3 months. And I know it's way more than that. Again, these are just the ones that I know about. And so I'll share their names, their ages, and a little bit of their stories, just because we know mainstream media will probably not mention any of them. And so we want to give them the respect. We also want to find justice for them and hopefully bring their family a little bit of peace. So I'm going to get to that a little bit later on. I'm also going to have a special guest join me, and we're going to talk about what we can do to change this narrative. How can we stop the increased violence from happening? Like, what are the answers? What are our options? Like, what we need to do. But I just want to go through a few stats. Like, according to the National Black Women's Justice Institute, 1 in 5 Black women are survivors of rape. 41% of Black women experience sexual coercion and other forms of unwanted sexual assault. And for every Black woman who reports rape, at least 15 does it. And then the flip side of that, the ones that do report it are often not believed. I'm assuming it's the strong Black woman stereotype that we have is why they don't see us as victims. And that's really unfortunate. I personally know multiple people that have been raped and abused that have not shared their story publicly. And the person who attacked them are out here living their life free with no care in the world, while these Black women suffer this trauma, and I'm pretty sure there are a lot of people that you may know that have trauma that they're not talking about because, one, they feel like people are not going to believe them. And then if we go a little deeper, which may need to be another episode, sometimes it happens in the family. And what is the number one rule or the number one saying in Black households? What happens in this family stays in the family. I'll keep my thoughts on that for another episode. But those numbers for Black women that are assaulted, it's ridiculous. Most women who are girls who are, sexually assaulted or abused, there's a study that kind of correlates into incarceration because they don't deal with this trauma. They have this built up anger, which is justified anger, but we don't get the therapy. We don't talk about it. We don't report it. So they act out in other ways. And then now they're in the justice system or they're in jail. Right now in jail, 44% of the women are Black, and 86% of those Black women have experienced sexual violence. We have to see that the trauma that we're not dealing with, this is what's getting us in these bad situations. We got to deal with it, but we got to try to prevent it first. That's the problem. Why are Black girls and Black women under attack? June is National Gun Violence Awareness Month. And I remember reading a study, or not a study, but the stats. In 2020, 1,821 Black women and girls were killed, an average of 5 per day, which was an increase from 2019, like a 33% increase from 2019. A report in 2021 from the Violence Policy Center found that Black women murdered by men are nearly always killed by someone they know, most commonly with a gun. And the vast majority of homicides of Black females murdered by males were not related to any other felony crime. More than likely it was domestic. Can we say that? I don't know. Now I want to get into women who have lost their life to gun violence in the last few months. Just want to shout them out again, like I said, to give them some coverage because most of them have not even made mainstream media. which is so unfortunate. And it pisses me off. Even if we jump right into A.J. Owens, this was the most recent one that we all know about. She was a 35-year-old mother of 4. She was shot dead by her neighbor in Florida. And you know how we found out, or I found out, I can't speak for everyone, it's because Twitter got involved. Black Twitter, Instagram, they did all of this because they weren't even releasing the neighbor's name or picture, which we knew he or she was white. When we don't see the picture, we know it's not black, because if that was the opposite way around and AJ had shot her neighbor, her white neighbor, oh, AJ's photo would have been all over the news. The lady, I don't even know her name. I don't even care her name. Was finally arrested 4 days later. Only because Black Twitter and Black IG. Does Black IG have a name? I don't know. They got involved. But I'm still not satisfied with that, because how many times have we seen them arrested and nothing happens? This lady shot AJ in front of her child through a locked door. She should have immediately been arrested. It's crazy. That was June 2nd. So let me just go by. I wrote a list of women down that have died in the last 2.5-3 months. 20-year-old Jediamond Jones. She was shot dead days before she was set to graduate as a nurse. Akeisha Gray, shot dead in front of her children, her 3 children. Mother of 3, New Orleans. Tisha Bruley, ambushed in the back of a Uber in Atlanta, and police think it was a targeted attack. A couple days before in Atlanta, Brianna Woods, 28 years old, shot in front of her home by a guy she was dating. She worked at a coffee shop. He came in often to work on his computer. They struck up conversation and started dating. Had been dating a couple months. Shot and killed her. Dr. Kalendra Green, she was a public health official, murdered by her husband, and then he killed himself. Arena Preston, a police officer in Chicago, 24 years old, shot in front of her house in uniform, had just got off from her shift. Young men out. They decided they wanted to rob someone. They attempted to rob her, pulled out a gun, and they shot. She fired back. They shot more and killed her. Took her gun and drove off like it was nothing. How many? I'm not understanding. Rachel King, 35, sitting in a Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru with her 11-year-old son in Pennsylvania. Man comes up, walks up to the car, shoots her multiple times, shoots her dead in front of her 11-year-old son. Imagine the trauma that has caused that young boy. Imagine that. Amaya Montserrat, 15 years old, shot dead at an Ohio birthday party. Amaya's out trying to have a good time, and she's no longer here. Someone has to bury their 15-year-old child. What is really going on? Simone Richardson, charter school teacher, shot dead on Chicago's South Side. Winter Straw, 25 years old, killed in domestic violence situation with her boyfriend of multiple years. Like, what is happening? I don't understand it. And the names that I'm giving you, these are all within the last couple of months. This is not over years. It's happening back to back to back. Even if I go to my hometown, I don't even know my hometown of St. Louis, Missouri. I don't even know the story behind it. But the alert came across my phone. 4 teenagers shot. 4 teenage girls, black girls, shot. 2 fatally. All of them were 18 except for one who was 17. What is happening? Is there a war against black girls and black women? Because I feel like it is. I don't know if you do. And I'm angry. If I go back to A.J. Owens, when I first opened up my phone and it popped up, I just shut it. I didn't even want to know the story. Like, I read the headline and I shut it because I was like, here we go again. That was literally the first thing that I thought. I didn't even know the details behind it. I just saw this 35-year-old black woman was shot by her neighbor through a locked door. I think that was the headline. And I immediately got pissed off. Didn't go back to the story until later that night when I had to be in a better mental space to read it and try to understand it. And all of these women that I mentioned, they're on, there is this website and there's this Instagram page that I follow, blackgirltragic.com. Please log on to their website or follow them on Instagram because they share all of these stories of violence against Black women. And most of them, majority of them, we will never hear about, which is unfortunate because these women, these Black women, deserve to be paid attention to. Like, I see them and you should see them too. Their stories need to be told. We need to get justice for every last one of these women, these Black women. So please go and check out their website when you get a moment, blackgirltragic.com. If you have a loved one who is gone because of gun violence or some type of violence, share your story with them so they can highlight it, because we need all the attention that we can get and all the eyes that we can get on Black girls and Black women, because for some reason we're not seen as victims, or we're not seen as important enough that people would care, I guess. So is there a war on Black women right now? Am I the only one that's feeling like the violence against us has increased? I'm tired of waking up and hearing stories like this. You know, what do we do? I know it's not a simple answer. I know that. I don't know. Like, I'm taking these pauses in between this because I don't really know what to say. I don't have the solution. I don't even know what the problem is. Like I said, it's increased and I don't understand why. Maybe you can tell me. All right, so let me bring someone in on this conversation, and maybe she can shed some light into this unfortunate moment in time that we're in. So joining me now is American feminist, playwright, director, and author of Humanist in the Hood, Unapologetically Black, Feminist, and Heretical, Sikivu Hutchinson. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. So I really wanted you to come in on this conversation because reading an article about your Women in Leadership organization and your Standing for Black Girls project. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the Women's Leadership Project is a Black feminist mentoring, civic engagement, advocacy, and organizing program in South LA high schools. And we've been in existence for over 20 years now. We started out at one of the South LA middle schools, Audubon Middle School specifically, and that had a predominantly African-American and Latinx community population. And so that is our demographic, African-American and Latinx, female-identified youth across sexuality as well as gender-expansive and queer youth. And our curriculum emphasizes sexual harassment, sexual violence prevention education, as well as domestic and intimate partner violence prevention education. In addition to college readiness, redressing the school-to-prison pipeline by providing youth with paid internships and job opportunities. And Standing for Black Girls is a task force and coalition that was spearheaded by our students during the pandemic. It initially grew out of a survey that a couple of our students conducted, and they were ninth and 10th grade students that conducted a survey with African-American and Latinx survivors of sexual harassment and sexual violence. And what came out of that survey was the fact that the majority of African-American girls who responded to it, who were survivors of sexual harassment and sexual violence, said that they had no therapeutic intervention, no counseling, basically nothing to help them to navigate the trauma and the anxiety that they were experiencing as a result of having been victims of violence. So what we did with that data is to start a Standing for Black Girls wellness initiative, which provides free individual therapy via one of our community partners, Open Path Counseling, for queer identified girls of color, African American girls, and other folks that are gender expansive who are 14 to 24 years old. And so the emphasis is on placing them with therapists/clinicians that come from their backgrounds, are knowledgeable about their lived experiences, and can provide a humanistic form of therapy. Because another thing that came out of our surveys and a lot of the anecdotal discussion with youth is that if they're queer identified, that they really did not want to have any type of faith-based or religious-oriented therapy. And so it was really paramount for us to identify practitioners that were coming from that humanistic lens. So those are some of the things that we do with Standing for Black Girls. Another initiative that we do twice a year is a public rally and a march to amplify the lived experiences of African American girl and young women survivors and victims of violence, be it sexual violence, sex trafficking, domestic and intimate partner violence, or women that have gone missing. So one of the stats that's come out nationwide and certainly locally is that Black women and girls comprise a third of those who go missing in the United States. And that is consistent with the stats that we see here in the city of Los Angeles and the LA County as well.
And the sad thing about this is when majority of them go missing, we do not hear anything about it unless I feel, social media gets involved, which is unfortunate.
Absolutely.
We hear that, what is it, the white woman, missing white woman syndrome. We hear that all of the time, but I don't know how, and this is a part of what, I try to do stories about things like this because I don't know how we can make Black girls and Black women more of a focus. It needs to be some type of urgency when we go missing or when we are murdered. And the question is, how do we get more attention on our Black girls and our Black women?
Yeah, so one thing that is being done in the state of California is one of the state senators, Stephen Bradford, whose jurisdiction is South LA, Southwest LA. He has spearheaded a bill called the Ebony Alert, and this would actually put African American girls and women front row and center in terms of alerting law enforcement, alerting the media that they have gone missing. One thing that's emerged from this piece of legislation in reporting on it is that Black women and girls are frequently dubbed runaways, particularly young Black women and girls, and there's no priority, as you mentioned, placed on trying to find them, on amplifying their stories, connecting with their families, doing anything beyond just tokenizing those cases when the community elicits, when there's backlash and outrage elicited within the community.
Why do you think that is? I know everything about, what's the young girl, Gabby Petito, whatever. I don't want to say whatever, but I know everything about her story. She's not from LA, she's not from St. Louis, but I still know. So I guess the question is, why do media, law enforcement, don't they think it's important to get our information out there, to share information about Black girls and Black women?
Yeah, I think you see the intersection of the usual forces of white supremacy and misogyny or anti-Black misogyny operating here, in addition to hyper-segregation. So historically, we know that Black women and girls have been deemed to be Jezebels, deemed to be hypersexual, deemed to be less than human, that we've always been perceived as quote-unquote unrapeable, and this emerges from a whole regime of plantation subjugation and dehumanization that Black women experienced, being dubbed and constructed as breeders. And so that continues to inform the way that we're viewed within the criminal justice system and within public policy, within K through 12 schools, in every sector. Black women and girls are demeaned and quote-unquote adultified. And your audience probably knows that adultified means that Black girls are perceived to be far older than their literal years and are treated thusly within, again, these systems of oppression. Be it African American preschoolers who are suspended and expelled when they throw a tantrum, or handcuffed when they throw a tantrum. Black girls that are beat up by school resource officers because they won't relinquish their phones. We've seen this time and again happening with very young African American girls, to the point where we have, if we look at it with regard to this nexus of the sexual abuse to prison pipeline, we have the highest rates of domestic sex trafficking. Here in LA County, those who are at the highest risk of being sex trafficked are African American girls between the ages of 12 to 14. And we know that's the sweet spot of being in middle school and transitioning into ninth grade. So we're vulnerable on so many levels. And ultimately, it comes down to that social history of anti-Black misogyny that we're still grappling with in the 21st century. And we look how this reverberates in terms of Black girls' mental health. Some really horrendous stats that came out a few months ago that, once again, was virtually under the radar, is the fact that Black girls have some of the highest suicide rates in the nation.
Yeah,
and again, that age group, that super vulnerable age group, 12 to 14, that the suicide rates among Black girls have skyrocketed 59%.
Did they say or try to give a reason as to why they think these rates have gone up so high?
I was going to say that it's interesting that these stats predate the pandemic.
Okay.
So a lot of times we try and parse these stats in terms of, well, things just blew up when the pandemic transpired, that we had distance learning, that a lot of kids were at home and subject to victimization and abuse, that we had multiple issues of Black girls being caregivers and caretakers and having to saddle all this stress and trauma. But again, I think it's just the fact that the spotlight is so unrelentingly on us in terms of we have to assume all of these different roles, and we have to do it in a sacrificial way where we are not perceived as needing help, and when we reach out for help, we're victimized for it. We are victim blamed and victim shamed and gaslighted for it.
So we know the rates have increased. We also know Black girls go missing or they're murdered, 4 times higher than other races. Plus, Black women are 4 times more likely to die by violence than white or Latino women. And maybe it's just me, but does it seem like this is increasing? Like, I feel like this year and even parts of last year, the violence, and I'm going back to gun violence because it says National Gun Violence Awareness Month, it just seems like it's a lot. I don't know the word to say, like, I feel it used to be like women are off limits. I know that's crazy, but you would hear women are off limits, children are off limits, and things like that back in the day. Unfortunately, we've been gradually getting to this point, but I'm not understanding how we got there, if that makes sense.
I think that we can also lay the blame on these permissive gun laws or lack thereof in terms of how easy it is for very young folks to get their hands on guns. And of course, we have this totally pernicious NRA white supremacist gun lobby that has ramped up the normalization of violence in the public and private sectors. And this is really deleterious for African American communities because we have, again, these nexus factors of high poverty, hyper-segregation, millennials and Gen Z African Americans who have skyrocketing unemployment rates, who are unable to graduate college in 4 to 5 years. I mean, the average college graduation time frame for African Americans is 6 years. And all of these factors of socioeconomic turbulence that are transpiring in our communities, I think, are exacerbating these high rates of gun homicide. And obviously, African American men and boys have the highest rates of gun homicide deaths in the nation. We're right behind. We actually have, Black women and girls actually have higher gun homicide rates than white men. We have disproportionate gun homicide rates vis-a-vis white men. And that's unprecedented in terms of what you invoked before, this myth that women and children are off limits. We know that's never, ever been the case.
Right.
I mean, we were brought here in chains and raped and abused ad nauseum with impunity. So we know that's never been the case in terms of our bodies and our lives and our trajectories. But as you said, it's gotten worse. And it's gotten worse because of this confluence of issues that we're dealing with. And we could go down the line and just look at the high rates of maternal mortality among African American women, the lack of access to reproductive health care, and how that is really terrorizing our communities in terms of our right to self-determination and access. So there's so many issues.
It's ironic you would bring that up. My episode last week was about maternal mortality and Black women, and I interviewed the cousin of April Valentine, the young lady who died, in Inglewood at Centennial Hospital. And my question to her, and I'm the same thing I'm asking you, what can we do? I know it's not a simple answer, but what is it that we can do? We advocate for ourselves and we advocate for our sisters, and I'm looking out for my sisters and I'm looking out for my friends and things like that, trying to be vigilant. But what can we do to stay safe? Whether it's to keep from going missing, being murdered, abused, assaulted, what is it that we can do? Because it feels like things are coming every which way. Like you have to constantly be on guard.
Yeah,
we just can't relax.
Yes. And so going back to the school community context, what I see in terms of the imperative of prevention education is that our youth are not receiving it. It's not culturally responsive when they do receive it. It's piecemeal insofar as our health education curriculum is very threadbare and it's minimal. We have youth that enter ninth grade, they take a health class for a semester, and then that's the end of it. So what has been, I think, very beneficial for our youth population, African-American girls who are, for the most part, coming from families where they will be the first in their families to go to college, high poverty, working class, living in some instances in extended families or in foster care or having been unhoused at some point, is the prevention education. And really getting in there at the ground floor, not just obviously with female-identified Black youth, but also male-identified Black youth. And raising critical consciousness about the socio-historical factors, the cultural factors, all of the issues that we've just raised, and how they can exercise self-determination in their lives and pursue college and careers, and also engage with issues of equity and justice in their communities, to give back to younger folk, do the mentoring, do the peer advocacy, engage with policymakers, hold their feet to the fire, try and disrupt these systems of over-policing and mass incarceration and criminalization that we see ad nauseum in our schools. So that's one factor that I really hammer on. The other is uplifting and amplifying Black women and girl serving and Black women and girl focused community-based organizations. We know that we historically have very low rates of philanthropic funding, very low rates of public sector funding when it comes to our nonprofits and 501c3s and other CBOs that are on the ground doing direct service or engaging at the local, the state, the federal level on policy. We are egregiously underfunded and underserved. So one of the things that we're doing in a couple of weeks is we're holding a press conference to talk about the very issues that you're raising in this podcast from the local perspective, because there was a devastating report that just came out from the LA City Civil and Human Rights Division that underscored the fact that Black women are under siege. We're 4.3% of LA City's population, yet we are 25 to 35% of female victims who are victimized by everything from domestic violence to sexual violence to sex trafficking. Our numbers are off the charts. So we're going to amplify that at this press conference, the fact that there's been no direct engagement on city government's part with Black women CBOs, and really challenge them on funding, on participatory budgeting, on trying to develop facilities in our community that Black children, Black youth can go to after school.
Right.
We don't have those in South LA. I mean, it's a criminal tragedy and a shame. You drive down these blocks and you see vacant lots, brownfields, boarded up buildings, and there are no youth community centers that our children can go to. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely appalling. And if we were to drive 15 minutes to the west in a predominantly white and Asian area, we see teen centers, we see recreation centers. I mean, all of these spaces where youth can congregate, youth can actually receive mental health care, social emotional resources, participate in extracurricular programs, receive job training, professional development. We don't have that here. Mm-hmm. And it's a criminal damn shame. So that's what we will be pursuing.
And I think it's across the board. Like I said, I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, but I know when I was younger, I had Junior Achievement, I had after school program, Boys and Girls Club, Matthew Dickey's. We had all of the Black youth. We had all of that, and now when I look at my younger cousins and think they don't have any of that. In the city of St. Louis, they don't have any of that anymore. And it's pretty much the same thing. They're boarded up vacant buildings and things like, just all around these city blocks that can be turned into a community center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a cancer. It's a national cancer.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it seems simple on the face of it, like open up some youth-serving community centers, but, I mean, it's like Mount Everest. I mean, we've been banging this drum for so many years, and it's just an outrage.
Yeah.
And even if we talk about facilities and resources for queer youth, for example, I mean, there's nothing. And that's like a whole other context in terms of our ingrained homophobia and transphobia within the African American community and how that toxicity undermines the mental health of queer Black youth.
Mm-hmm. The press conference that you have coming up, is it public? And when is it? Yes, it's public.
Yeah, so it's June 22nd. That's a Thursday. It'll be at 10 a.m., and it's going to be right here in the heart of South L.A., actually right in front of one of the council members' so-called constituent center.
Before I let you go, your Women in Leadership organization, how can people get involved in it if they want to volunteer or just be a part of it, or if they have youth that they want to bring a part and be a part of the project or the organization?
Yes. So they can reach out to us via our website. We're at Women's Leadership LA, all one word, .org. And then we're also on Instagram, and that's WL Project _.
All right. And do you have any other projects coming up that you want to mention?
Well, we have our scholarship awards that we're doing actually the next day after that press conference, and that honors youth that have been involved in our program since 9th, 10th grade. They have graduated, and they're on their way to college. So we're really excited about that. And that's named after Lorraine Hansberry. It's called the First in the Family Humanist Lorraine Hansberry Scholarship. So we're doing that on June 23rd. That is private. I just wanted to shout that out because I'm really proud of our graduates. And it's also a multi-year scholarship, by the way. So that's,
nice. That's
one of the things that yes. Yeah, it was really important for me to try and get funding for multi-year support because oftentimes we see one-shot scholarships, and those are great, but scholarships that follow our youth throughout their 4 or 5, 6-year tenure at college are even better, in my view. The other thing I wanted to shout out is we're doing a Black Feminist Institute. That's a culminating summer institute on August 4th. And we'll have more details about that on our website, but that will also be for high school students and some of our college alums.
Sounds like you have a lot of amazing things coming up. I wish you the best in everything, and I truly appreciate you stepping up to the mic today. Sikivu Hutchinson, thank you again.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
And thank you for tuning in. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, Just Another Black, BLK Girl on the M.I.C. Also on YouTube. Yeah, I'm on YouTube now. Just Another Black Girl on the M.I.C. Like, subscribe, and tell a friend. And meet me here next time. Same time, same place? Not really, but I'll be back.